The challenge that I see of all of this venture is the sort of elephant in the room, which is the economic business models of surveillance capitalism, which, at the VR Privacy Summit, like we got to okay, we can architect this perfect system that would like protect the privacy, but it's sort of in contradiction to the underlying economic models of surveillance capitalism. And we're here at the Decentralized Web Camp, which I would love for people to come up here and say, here's a completely alternative economic model and system that is scalable and could be sort of swapped out to this existing model. But, in some ways, Kevin Kelly argues that once you have access to certain technological features, you can never really take them away. They're always there. And we've got this entire civilization that's built upon this use of using these technologies. And so it's not like we can unplug it and revert back to, 5 years ago. And so it feels like we kind of have to go from where we're at. But the thing that I'm struggling with is like these consolidation of these companies and surveillance capitalism and this fundamentally potentially unethical in a Kantian sense of using data against our own will. But it's done with these adhesion contracts and these terms of service that create a utilitarian exchange where they're giving us services for exchange for that. So they're violating our own autonomy and our data sovereignty in exchange for something they're providing a service, but yet that's sort of the legal frameworks that is justifying this other sort of more unethical surveillance capitalism.
So you just said the key word there, which is that this idea that they violated this contract. I don't know if you use that word specifically, but that's kind of what you were hinting at. The thing that has to change is that I don't think this happened intentionally, but Silicon Valley has been masquerading as being in a contractual or equal relationship, a peer-to-peer relationship with you and them. You hit the terms of service button, you hit OK, you sign on the dotted line, we're in this equal relationship. I say this because a magician also tries to show you that they're in an equal relationship. I'm just a person, you're just a person, this is a deck of cards, which card would you like to pick? They pretend to have an equal relationship while hiding an invisible asymmetry of power. The magician knows a lot more about how to get you to pick the card that you're about to pick than you do. In fact, you don't know the 20 steps that led to you arriving in this moment where they actually already talked to the person that's going to do something behind you, that's sitting behind you right now that you don't know. So the thing with technology, and to answer your question about the business model, is that we actually got here by accident. The big original sin of the internet was the advertising, let's actually be more specific, the engagement-based business model, which directly couples profit with the subversion of human autonomy through gathering more data to build a better and more accurate voodoo doll of you, which is used to subvert your autonomy to get you to do what I want you to do. We actually have a name for these kinds of asymmetric relationships, and it's the fiduciary relationship, where, if you think about what is the level of asymmetry between what a psychotherapist knows about psychology and also the degree of sensitive information you are sharing with a psychotherapist. We don't let psychotherapists have romantic relationships with their clients for a reason, because there's a degree of compromising entanglement that they've shared vulnerable information, and they're also in this new power dynamic with a psychotherapist where that asymmetry of power has to be regulated not as contract law. It's actually like illegal to say, well, we're just in this equal relationship, because we're not. So if you actually just did a side-by-side comparison of all places where we already invoke fiduciary law, doctors and their patients, lawyers and their clients, psychotherapists and their clients, and say, take a protractor, what is the degree of asymmetry in the compromising levels of asymmetry that exist between those and people? And now look at Facebook and Google and say, is the asymmetry greater or smaller than those other ones? And it's exponentially greater. So this is actually just done. This is basically like we made this mistake. You cannot have a business model. So now let's make it worse. Not only do we make the mistake about the contract versus fiduciary, imagine a world where all doctors, all lawyers, and all psychotherapists' entire business model was to sell access to the confession booth, to the legal case. They only made money by manipulating you as much as possible by selling access to someone else. We would never allow for that business model. We could say we could have psychotherapists, but we'd always want the client to pay, or some third party like healthcare to pay. You can't have a world where that level of asymmetry has an extractive business model where the more you use it and more data is accumulated, the more I manipulate you to get you to do what I want to do. So this is really important because it says if we just actually move to this sort of fiduciary relationship, it kills the business model. You can't have that business model if it's a fiduciary relationship. And that's one of the things that has to happen.
We've been covering a lot of the systemic issues. I want to focus on the morality and then ask a few more questions to wrap up. But in terms of the pragmatic things that experiential designers can do, it sounds like that as a design ethicist and for the Center for Humane Technology, you're trying to come up with these broader moral principles or virtues you're trying to design for. And when I look at things like artificial intelligence and virtual reality, there's like this shift of context where these technologies are so pervasive and kind of blurring the lines between all these different contexts. For example, biometric data used to be in a medical context. Now that's going to be in a context for being available for anybody in these variety of different contexts that, may be used for surveillance capitalism. And so we have these different ethical transgressions that have already been happening, but even more that are on the horizon. And so how do you make sense of the human experience in all these variety of different contexts, and a framework for designers to be able to navigate these variety of different moral dilemmas that we're facing, all these transgressions that we've had? Like, how does the Center for Humane Technology make sense of, do you have like an ethical framework to help navigate these moral issues?
Yeah, it's tricky. We'd love to provide many more frameworks that we have, but we just haven't been putting together into like materials. I mean, the other issue here is that ethical technology or humane technology and ethical design are not just a matter of like a PDF that you can just do some checkboxes and be like, oh, I hit the checklist, I'm ethical now. Ironically, we have a PDF on our website that you can look at to see what our humane design guide of just doing an assessment. The point is that ethics shouldn't be an afterthought. It shouldn't be something where you do a checklist at the end. It has to be built in. And I think, like you said, we're confronted with a whole new slew of ethical issues because there's been a breakdown of context. As you said, biometric data used to only be available in certain medical contexts, and now it's available in every context because technology does that. But we have a framework to answer this question you asked me, which is going straight to Mark Andreessen, the founder of Netscape, when he said in 2011 that software is eating the world. So he left out the second part. So first of all, like, why is he saying that? It's because take any domain of life, medicine, doctors, taxi cabs, media, advertising. The version of that field or that domain of life run by technology will always outcompete the version that's not run by technology. It's going to be faster, more efficient, et cetera, more profitable. So software will eat every other part of society. Now, what that means is that software, it's eating up the protections that we had on each of those parts of society. So now, imagine the moment when software eats Saturday morning cartoons. So that used to be a protected area of the attention economy, governed by certain protections and rules. For example, you're not allowed to push URLs in TV ads to kids. You have to watch out for certain kinds of advertising has to air. There has to be regularly scheduled programming. There's things called stopping cues that used to exist where there was a period of a number of seconds that the television had to be dark, just like black screen, for a few seconds to give the kids a chance to wake up and ask, like, what do I want to do next? Do I want to take a break, get a snack, go talk to mom? And when technology or YouTube gobbles up Saturday morning, does it care or look at the protections that used to exist in that part of society? No. So the same thing is true of election advertising. So we used to have the FEC, Federal Election Commission, rules that it should cost the same amount for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to reach a voter at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday on this TV channel. Why in the world would you make it unequal? It has to be fair. So we regulated that. That was a protection. And then when Facebook gobbles up that portion of the attention economy or advertising, it takes away those protections because now it's actually run by an auction, run by a private company with their own private incentives, and it's totally not equal. In fact, there was a 20-to-1 difference in the price of election ads. But the reason I'm invoking this metaphor is because a tool we can use to ask what's the right thing to do is to ask for that area of society that we used to govern, whether it's biometric data or elections or Saturday morning cartoons, what protections did we have in place before software ate that part of the world? And how do we retrieve, in a Marshall McLuhan sense, those protections and bring them back and ask what were the principles that we might reapply and we need to reinstantiate? So that's one class of regulatory or policy or even just design thinking that has to get retrieved and brought back from the past. And the second class are a whole new set of ethical issues about what happens when we combine these 5-6 data sets we never had before and we can predict something new about a person that the medical literature didn't even have a say on because we couldn't predict that before. And that's a whole new set of issues. So our problem statement at the Center for Humane Technology for the whole issue is that when you zoom out, we just go to E.O. Wilson, the Harvard sociobiologist. He said that the real problem of humanity is we have Paleolithic emotions, meaning ancient Stone Age emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. The important thing to see about these three different domains is that our Paleolithic emotions and instincts are baked. It's like hardware that's just not changing. Your social validation system and nervous system is just baked. Our medieval institutions update about every 4 years, and they're certainly not keeping pace with our accelerating, exponentiated, godlike technology. If your steering wheel lags 4 years behind the accelerator, what happens? It's a self-terminating system. So our mission is to fit and embrace our Paleolithic emotions, since they're not changing, and go from them being maladaptive to our good sense-making and choice-making to being adaptive to good sense-making and choice-making. And then upgrading our medieval institutions to be in a faster clock rate to basically keep in touch with the modern realities and the complexity, which means a whole bunch of things has to happen there. And then slow down and guide with more wisdom the godlike technology. We have to have the wisdom to wield godlike technology. Another phrase from Barbara Marx Hubbard is, we have the power of gods without the wisdom, love, and prudence of gods. So that's what has to happen. Like, this isn't like an opinion. This is like, this just has to happen, because otherwise we're driving ourselves off a cliff. So hopefully that's a good articulation of at least what has to change, with, and maybe some more clarity on what we're doing in the process.